Delighted to say I'm joined by Jerome O'Connell of the Limerick Leader. Jerome, how are you doing? We're here to talk.
Well, Shane,
We're here to talk Limerick hurling. Semi-finals coming this weekend. Doon against Kilmallock and Patrickswell against Na Piarsaigh. Now, I was looking at one of your own pieces there recently, and you were saying it's the fourth successive year that these four teams have made the semi-finals. So, is there very much a top tier of these four, and then everyone else?
yeah, there is, Shane. I mean, the four of them will be there on merit. In Limerick, we have 12 senior clubs, two groups of six ordinarily, in a non-COVID year, Senior A, Section A as they call it, and a Section B. But Na Piarsaigh, Patrickswell, Kilmallock and Doon would be the big four in Section A. Adair probably being ever present in Section A, and then you would have the likes of Ahan, Ballybrown, South Liberties, probably coming next in the pecking order. But I don't think there's anyone denying that the big four, certainly the big four, they're the ones that have been appearing in county finals across the last decade, and three of them would have county titles in the last number of years. Doon being the odd one out, still waiting for their breakthrough, but with a club with massive underage success, and just completed a back-to-back of under-21 titles there in the last couple of weeks.
And just the overall spread of quality in Limerick, especially these teams, is very strong. The Piarsaigh have their All-Ireland title for 2016, got to another final. Kilmallock got to a final in 2014, if I remember correctly. Did you expect Patrickswell to kick on and go a little bit further when they got through?
Yeah, Patrickswell haven't, managed to just make that breakthrough in Munster club there for the last couple of years. They've been through on two occasions and just haven't really fired, and they'd be a reasonably experienced outfit as well. Obviously they have the big three of Dermot Burns, Cian Lynch and Aaron Gillan, but I mean on top of that there's plenty more quality and experience. You've three O'Brien brothers, Mark Carmody, a couple of younger lads, Brian Murray in goals. There's no shortage of quality across their team, and I think it's probably a little bit of a disappointment to themselves as well that on the two recent occasions, or most recent occasions that they've been into Munster, that they just haven't clicked and just haven't produced the performances, especially, as you said, when you see the way Kilmallock and Na Piarsaigh, practically dominated Munster there for a couple of seasons.
Absolutely. So the semi-finals this weekend, as I said, Doon versus Kilmallock, Patrickswell against Na Piarsaigh. Just to reflect on how Doon got here, beating South Liberties in the quarter-final 320 to 212. But there was a fairly heavy price to be paid in that game, with Darragh O'Donovan going off injured early. Now, I don't know if he's going to be available for this weekend, but it was very impressive to win without him and Richie English, who's out for the season.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a good test for them because they were down 6-7 points at that stage when Darragh O'Donovan went off. I think it was 1-5 to a point. Now, South Liberties are playing with the breeze, but I mean they were big underdogs going into this one, and they really had started well. Darragh O'Donovan is ordinarily a midfielder for Doon, but they've already had to swap him to centre back this year with the absence of Richie English, and then for him to be forced off. And they've even had further injuries as well, with the likes of Stephen Ryan, Cathal McNamara, maybe even Eddie Kiley, who've all been options for him in recent years, and all defenders at that as well. They've all been ruled out up until now. So it really was a test for him, but I think a lot of their younger players stood up for him as well. As I said, they've had back-to-back under-21 titles. They introduced two or three of those off the bench as well, and they all made an impact. There's a wealth of talent out there, but as you said, they're now down probably what would be their two big players in Darragh O'Donovan and Richie English. Still awaiting an update on Darragh O'Donovan. I do know that he was for a scan yesterday, I believe, but wait and see on that. But it certainly didn't look good for him, and I think it would be quite a turnaround if he was able to play on Saturday evening.
Kilmallock were on TV for that first game against Na Piarsaigh in the group stages. Really, really impressive. And Graeme Mulcahy stood out an absolute mile in that game. So if Doon are down both Richie English and Darragh O'Donovan in the defence, I mean, who's going to stop that man, Graeme Mulcahy?
Yeah, and as I said, they've kind of been rejigging their defence as the season has gone on. They've Owen Fitzgibbon into fullback this year, who'll be one of the more experienced players. He's been in the corner for recent years, and the last day when Darragh was forced off, they had to move Mikey O'Brien from wing back into centre back, and he's one of those that had come from the under-21 winning teams of the last 2 years, and he did quite well, to be fair to him. But it just, the resources are being tested all the time. And as you said, with Graeme Mulcahy, Micheál Houlihan, Oisin O'Reilly and plenty others in that Kilmallock attack, it would be quite a challenge they're going to face on Saturday evening. And Kilmallock were, probably the one team that did sparkle in the opening couple of group games in Limerick.
And are there any particular matchups from this game that you're looking forward to?
It's going to be a good one. I think for Kilmallock, and you mentioned him already, Graeme Mulcahy is the, not surprisingly, the one that makes them tick. And the big thing for Tony Ward and his selectors in Doon is, what did they do with him? Did they try to go man-to-man with him? And, if you're going to do that, I mean, guys that you would have mentioned would be Richie and Darren. You're down them. And I just wonder, because I do think if you can curb Graeme, it's not only his scores, but it's the amount of times he's fouled for frees from probably Micheál Houlihan to score. It's the amount of link-up plays that he does. Kilmallock can use him at full forward. They've also brought him to centre forward, where he just seems to run the game for him. So I think if you can pin down Graeme Mulcahy, it's a big thing. I'd like to see him maybe try someone and go man-to-man with him. But it'll be interesting to see how they look at that one. Kilmallock have also been using Paddy O'Loughlin, who's probably been more known as a wing back or centre back with Limerick. They've been using him at wing forward in the opening two games as well, as a kind of a ball winner and a creator for him in attack. So that's another interesting one that Tony Considine and Tim Smith have been using with Kilmallock, because they have a wealth of options across their defence, with the likes of Captain Philip O'Loughlin and his brother Mark, and Gavin O'Mahony is there. Paddy O'Brien will probably be at the other wing forward. So there's an awful lot of options there. And, when you mention all those players, you just start to see the size of the task that's ahead for a depleted Doon team.
Yeah, so, and for that reason, would you be tipping Kilmallock to come through?
I think if Kilmallock are at the form that they were back in the group stages, it's very hard to look beyond them, especially when Doon are under strength. Doon at full tilt are a different outfit for me. They've been missing Dean Coleman as well in recent weeks with an injury. I think he might be pushed back into action the weekend, which would be another real quality attacking option for him. And they do have attacking options. That's the thing about Doon. They have Pat Ryan, they have Barry Murphy, they have a young guy Jack Ryan, who's really been scoring at the moment. Dean Coleman would be another option. They've got big Josh Ryan. They have all the forward options. It's defence and midfield that they've really had to reshuffle in recent weeks. And just think if Darragh doesn't make it, it tips the scales to Kilmallock for me. The big question for Kilmallock, of course, is they haven't played since back on the 8th of August in competitive hurling. I know there's been a number of challenge games, amongst the teams across Limerick in the last 3-4 weeks, but as you know, no real better test than a real quality championship game. And in fairness, South Liberties did put it up to Doon last week, so they have that under their belt. And they might be hoping that Kilmallock are maybe a bit cold, but Tony Considine and Tim Smith will be well aware of that loophole.
So it's a big double header down at the Gaelic grounds, and the second one is Patrickswell against Na Piarsaigh, which is a real it's definitely got the headline act feel to it. Na Piarsaigh beat Ballybrown last week, and Ballybrown were missing Mikey Kiley and Colin Coughlin, 26 points to 13. It was never in doubt, really, was it?
It was never in doubt, and when you take those two guys out of it, it was never in doubt, because they were absolutely huge parts of the Ballybrown defence. And Ballybrown has set up all year with a 7-man defence, and they've been used the same system in all their games. Probably set up in terms of looking at a quarter final, which they would have hoped to have reached against one of the big guns. And to be missing maybe two of the most integral parts of that defensive 7 was an awful start for Ballybrown. And Na Piarsaigh were on form. They have the quality of players that's going to punish you with scores. And I think across their half forward line, they might have scored something like 13 points from play between Peter Casey, Kevin Downs and Conor Boylan. Just have quality all over the place, and they were just too strong for Ballybrown on that occasion. But Saturday night, Na Piarsaigh and Patrickswell, a totally different story.
How have Na Piarsaigh moved forward without Shane Dowling? I know he's been injured and in and out of the team to some degree for the past couple of years, but knowing that he's probably not going to feature this season, and having listened to him talk in the media in the past while, he doesn't know when he's going to play again. He's such a mercurial talent and can produce a moment or a goal out of nothing. Have they settled down now without him? Because that first game against Kilmallock, it was desperately unimpressive. And he himself, when he was interviewed after the game on TV, he definitely wasn't overly impressed with the hunger shown.
Yeah, no, Piarsaigh were very much off colour in that opening game, and looked a side that weren't ready for the intensity that Kilmallock brought. But maybe in the opening round game, a defeat is just exactly what you need to focus the mind, because a week later, they put a huge score on top of a hand. Then they had a couple of weeks break before Ballybrown, and they hit Ballybrown for 26 points. So they did look good against Ballybrown. They looked the side, back focused, back working hard. But I mean, you don't replace Shane Dowling. You don't replace Shane Dowling in a Limerick panel, never mind in a club panel. His leadership, his presence around the field for Na Piarsaigh has just been absolutely huge for the last decade. They've used him everywhere from corner forward to midfield. His free taking alone is absolutely huge to a club side. You're talking anything from the opposite 65, you can mark it down. Not to mention anything he stood over 21 metres from goal. He was thinking green flag. Impossible to replace that. And they've used William Henn as a free taker, but they've also used Peter Casey as a free taker as well. And the last day out, I see that Ronan Lynch is now taking a number of frees. So, they've kind of used the three guys as a free taker to try and replace the number of frees that Shane would have been taking for him. So, look, the easy answer is that you don't replace Shane Dowling. But, if someone is to be able to have the luxury of missing out someone like him, it is Na Piarsaigh. Peter Casey, Kevin Downs, Conor Boylan, Adrian Breen, David Dempsey and William Henn as six forwards. Absolutely nothing wrong with that six as a forward unit.
Yeah, it's not far off an inter-county forward. Like, since winning the All-Ireland in 2016 and then getting to the final again in 2018, having those great couple of games with Coola, there's been probably a managerial roundabout going on with Na Piarsaigh. And I wonder, like, even last year, 2019, Michael Ryan, former Tipperary manager, was over the team. That didn't go particularly great. And now Kieran Birmingham is in this year, and obviously there was that poor start, but here they are now in the semi-finals again. Are they the same team that they were a couple of years ago?
To be fair, there's a lot of mileage on the clock. Not alone at club level, where they've probably been hurling throughout the winter on more occasions than not since their breakthrough in 2011. You also had probably 6 to 7 of these guys on an inter-county panel every single year at senior level, not to mention down the ranks at minor and under 21 level. So, most of their squad were being caught up in inter-county teams. It's a lot of miles, it's a lot of training, but the hunger does still seem to be there. There's no doubt about it. I think the 2018 final will always be a big regret for them. They probably felt that second All-Ireland was within this team. I'm not quite sure if there's, if you would be talking about them as a potential All-Ireland champions this year, were there to be an All-Ireland championship. But they're certainly still strong enough to be competing at Limerick and Munster club level. Certainly to be competing. I'm not quite sure if you would have them on your shortlist as All-Ireland champions.
So on the Patrickswell side, Aaron Gillan is the name that jumps off the page. Well, so does Cian Lynch, or a hurler of the year, and Diarmuid Burns has been brilliant over the years, going back to the last 4 or 5 years for Limerick. But Aaron Gillan had been carrying a hand injury. I saw him on social media. He had a cast at one stage, looked like one of his fingers was bandaged up. So is he a doubt going into this game, or do we know if he's available?
He had an operation on that hand injury the week after their last group game back in the first week of August. So from what I understand, he will be ready to play. I think the break was probably badly needed, because he was carrying a bit of an ankle injury as well during those group games. So I think that rest will probably have just come at the right time for him. He should be okay to play. Haven't heard of anything else injury-wise out there, so this should be pretty much at full tilt. Josh Constantine had been missing for them earlier in the year. He was called into the Limerick panel this season and had missed a couple of their group games, but he was back and played in the county under-21 final where they lost to Doon a number of weeks ago. So, they have the big three. There's no doubt about it. The three inter-county guys will get a lot of the headlines, but beneath that, plenty talent with him. Josh Constantine and Jason Gillan, Aaron's younger brother, both now members of John Kiley's inter-county panel. And then you have the experience of three O'Brien brothers, Shawnee, Thomas, Kevin, Mark Carmody, Brian Murray in goals. They're a very settled unit, very experienced unit. And the big thing for Patrickswell is Patrickswell haven't won back-to-back Limerick titles since 96, 97. And, for a club with their record, that's a long wait.
And for Kieran Carey, what's his tenure been like?
Yeah, Kieran Carey, came in after Gary Kirby, and Gary was there and went close to titles with him, and Kieran has come in and they won a good championship last year. Beating the Piarsaigh to win a championship in Limerick is as much as you could ask for in the current environment. And the Piarsaigh have been the standard bearers. Patrickswell were worthy 5-point winners last year. Sunday is going to be a big test. Obviously the motivation that Na Piarsaigh will have to try and topple Patrickswell again. It's the makings of a really cracking encounter. Kieran has a really homegrown management team with him, with Natal O'Grady doing a lot of the coaching with him as well. So no shortage of experience with that crew, and for me it's a real makings of a right good game.
So if you're Na Piarsaigh, how do you try and shut down those three superstars that we've talked about, Aaron Gillane, Cian Lynch and Diarmuid Byrnes? I'm wondering, do you try to avoid Diarmuid Byrnes with your puck outs, for example? Would Will O'Donoghue go out and try and shut down Cian Lynch, or do you want to let him play his own game? And then of course there's the Aaron Gillane question.
Yeah, I suppose the big one in terms of man marking, will be Aaron Gillane, and no more than Graeme Mulcahy with Kilmallock. Do you try and go man to man with Aaron? But Aaron can roam around the field. Aaron could be at wing forward, centre forward, corner forward, or full forward, or all of them within any 2-minute spell. So it's hard to know what exactly Na Piarsaigh would do with him, but Na Piarsaigh would have a lot of options in all of those areas. If he comes to the edge of the square, it'll be a battle between himself and Mike Casey, and what a battle that would be. If he goes to the corner, you probably have maybe the experience of Carl King that could pick him up. If he comes to the half back line, I think maybe that Na Piarsaigh are a little bit vulnerable in their half back line, so maybe that's something that Patrickswell might go after him there a little bit, because Aaron Gillane is very strong in the air as well. Patrickswell will probably use Jason Gillane at centre forward, but maybe we might see Aaron come to wing forward for a spell. But for me, he's still at his most dangerous when he's closest to goal, and maybe that brings us to a big duel between himself and Mike Casey, which would certainly be one worth the subscription fee to watch online. When you talk about midfield, it's very hard to know if you pin William O'Donoghue straight on top of Cian Lynch and see what happens. Maybe you want Will to impose himself on his own game and get Na Piarsaigh into it. Tommy Grimes is also in midfield for Na Piarsaigh, and he would be more than able to pick up Cian Lynch. Curbing Cian Lynch is a lot easier said than done, so I'm not quite sure if you want to pin William O'Donoghue with him for the entire hour.
Yeah, I think if I was Na Piarsaigh, and obviously I'm not, I'd be looking at tell Mike Casey to follow Aaron Gillane no matter where he goes, any position, even if he goes out centre forward for a few minutes, just follow him out there, because if he can get on top of Aaron Gillane, there are some other really good forwards, and I think Kevin O'Brien soloing up the centre game after game for Patrickswell over the years. But I mean, if you can win that matchup there, I think you're in a great spot. Are there any other matchups or any other players to watch out for in this game?
There's plenty of young talent as well. It's got the makings of a right good game, and Patrickswell and Na Piarsaigh both have quality that around the field that would probably come to the fore in different games. I mentioned Tommy Grimes there with Na Piarsaigh. They've got Jerome Boylan at corner back. They've got Conor Boylan and Kevin Downs as two wing forwards, and it was good to see Kevin Downs was back to something close to his best again last weekend with 3 points from play against Ballybrown, and I haven't seen him maybe dominate a scoreboard for quite a while with Na Piarsaigh now, but I did think he looked sharp with him last week, and they used him as wing forward. He got 3 nice points, 2 great scores from distance early in the second half, and to see him back to that kind of scoring is a good thing for Na Piarsaigh. Conor Boylan, I think, probably hit 4 points from play in that game as well, so it was their half forward line that really dominated. But I mean, it was a game where Adrian Breen hardly featured, and anyone that knows club hurling in Limerick, Adrian Breen has probably been Mr. Consistent for a decade. I would have him in a club hurling team in a decade. any time in Limerick, and he's probably one that could come out the next day and score 4 or 5 points for play for him. At the opposite side, you are right that Patrickswell do rely a lot on Aaron Gillan for scores from frees and from play. He pops up at the goal when they need it. Other than him, you've got Kevin O'Brien, you've got Tomas O'Brien, you've got Jason Gillan. They can all do it, but Aaron is the consistent one. So if Mike Casey were to go toe to toe with him and in some way curb him and keep down the frees, it would be a big feather in the cap for Kieran Birmingham's Na Piarsaigh.
So if you were to call it, which way would you go?
I think we haven't seen the best of either of these sides. Kilmallock Patrickswell looked a little bit sluggish, a little bit under par in their games early in the year. Now, they got the wins and they knew that they were going to be through to the knockout stages. Maybe they didn't quite have to fire on all cylinders, but even their big three of Keane, Jimmer, Burns and Aaron, I didn't think any of that trio were really at full tilt either. So, who can get to full tilt? Na Piarsaigh put 26 points on Ballybrown last week. But strangely enough, I didn't think they were at full tilt either, and I've no doubt that they'll bring the best out of each other. But if what we've seen so far is a true reflection of either of them, and there isn't an improvement in them, they're going to pay the price for it. I liked the fact that Na Piarsaigh looked really, really hungry last week. That hunger, and maybe the motivation of losing last week might be just enough to see them through.
Okay, and a quick word on Limerick this year, because the first round in the Munster Championship is going to be doubling up as a league final with Clare, and then the reward is a semi-final in Munster against Tipperary. Are you looking forward to this particular clash? How do you think Limerick are set up for this championship?
Yeah, it's hard to know, and I suppose the big thing from a Limerick point of view is, and probably the same for all teams to be fair, but I mean, what shape they're going to be in by the time that comes around. We've already mentioned the likes of Aaron Gillan, Dara O'Donovan, Richie English, Shane Dowling, and that's just 4. Carrying Knox or else ruled out at the moment, and there's a number of others that I've seen. Kyle Hayes, and he's taped up massively as well at the moment. So there's an awful lot of guys carrying injuries, and it'll be just interesting to see how they are when October 24th or 25th comes around. There's no doubt about it. They were motoring well pre-COVID, but so much has changed since. It's really hard to know what shape they'll be in. They have the squad, and from what I can see, the hunger is still there. So expect them to be involved some way in terms of where the honours go. But as for their form and all that, really, really hard to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But having watched a couple of those games, like you mentioned how good they were in the spring, and the game that really stood out to me was in Limerick against Galway. The fact that they were able to play summer hurling in wintry conditions. And I think that's one of the things. The fact that they backed themselves to hit short stick passes to each other, even if a man is behind them, putting pressure on, that they trust their skill sets and do so in poor conditions. I think that's one of the things that might make them favourites for the All-Ireland that will be in the winter.
Yeah, they were moving really, really smooth in those couple of games. On occasions, they were an absolute joy to watch, as you said, the way and the confidence that they were moving the ball with. And this was given that they were probably interchanging 6 or 7 players in every game as well. They weren't going with a full crew in any game. Mostly it was 5 to 6 changes from game to game, and it was pretty much as seamless changes as well at that stage. Look, if they can regain that, there's no doubt about it. They will be a team or one of the teams to beat. It's just to see how it all has worked out. Maybe the break might even stand to Limerick. They have a lot of hurling done the last number of years. They've had a total break. From what I can see of those that I've seen in club games, physically they're in good nick in terms of being physically fit and ready. But if there are a couple of injuries, it does deplete the resources a little bit.
Brilliant stuff. Jerome O'Connell of the Limerick Leader, appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane.